Welcome back to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik, where we bring you news, politics, and culture without the red and blue treatment. My name is Jamal Thomas. I'm here with my co-host, Bob Schlehuber. Let's get ready to go against the grain. We have another loaded show for you today. We'll be starting off discussing a story from the New York Post on Wall Street's expected cabinet positions in the Biden administration. The belief is that Biden is taking a tactical position for modest rhetorical outreach for lefties, but expects to get remuneration for the monies they've dumped into the Democratic Party over the past. Unintentionally buried in this piece, however, is a part based on Wall Street's perspective of Sanders. Now, this was unintentionally buried in the story given the author's reaction, but I would make the point that this is more interesting than the entirety of this piece. They're going to get into the task force and Wall Street's perspective of the Biden-Bernie task force. A little later, we'll get into Biden's virtual campaign speeches going tragically wrong again. If you can't pull off a virtual rally, maybe you shouldn't upgrade to running a country. We'll also go into liberals getting really excited about Joe Biden polling. Now, in a world with the Electoral College, you should probably pump your brakes on that. The light at the end of the tunnel could very well be a moving bus. We'll also ask, what is the future of elections in the era of the COVID pandemic? A little later in the hour, we'll touch on AG Barr's big announcement in the direction of the criminal case and the origins of the Trump and Russia myth. We'll also hit the controversial topic that shouldn't be controversial at all, but with the discredited media, here we are. Trump is supposedly taking an unproven drug. Now, we're going to discuss the mainstream media's narrative on the reason that Trump is taking this particular drug, as opposed to it's the narrative on the reasons that Trump is taking this drug and why those narratives may not necessarily be accurate, any more accurate than they were on Trump and Russia. We'll also discuss the letter that Trump sent to the World Health Organization threatening to permanently cut off funding and to withdraw U.S. membership as they battle COVID-19 pandemic around the world. In an utterly astonishing show of projection and emancipatory hubris, Trump complained about quote-unquote repeated missteps by you and your organization, referring to the WHO, and claims that the organization must quote-unquote commit to major substantive improvements in the next 30 days to get funding resumed. Last month, Donald Trump cut funding to the World Health Organization, calling them too China-centric. Yeah, he did. Starting the second hour, we'll keep this train moving and discuss Obama's politicized graduation speech that not only went after Trump out of the pool and in cold water, flaccid response to the COVID-19 pandemic, but also goes into a weird, condescending, at the very least from my perspective, entirely unnecessary detour into black voters. We'll also discuss the disturbing and infuriating new information released on the Ahmaud Arbery case, the African-American jogger that was chased down by several good old boys in a pickup truck and murdered by gunshot. Last but not least, it is Tuesday, which means the most cultural segment on the network, the politics of art. This will be more literal today with the war of ads taking place between Biden and Trump on the airwaves and on social media. But let's start here. This story brought a smile to my face. A story that was released yesterday from the New York Post on Wall Street's belief in Joe Biden to deliver cabinet positions in his administration if he wins the general election. Their idea is that Joe Biden is basically tactically positioning himself in regards to modest rhetorical outreach to lefties, but they full well expect remuneration for the cash that they've dumped into the Democratic Party over the years and the cash that they're currently stuffing into Joe Biden's G-string. I would say that this gets it, of course. The entirety of this article that is basically making the point that Wall Street believes it's going to get something out of Joe Biden regardless of what he's saying rhetorically. I would say that's of course. I would even go so far as to say that part is not even all that interesting. That should be assumed. With the election pretty much decided, The quadrennial buying of the presidency has begun in earnest. Biden raised $60 million in April, the highest amount he raised this entire campaign season. Trump bested him with $61 million. Now, Biden has the backing of Bloomberg and his billions. Bloomberg spent $1 billion in the primary. Well, that guy who spent $1 billion in the primary is backing Joe Biden, in addition to a slew of other billionaires that have given Joe Biden their backing. This includes people from oil and gas, healthcare, and whatever other dark money that Joe Biden is going to take as he runs in this race. We should also remember history. Meaning back in 2008 in the Obama race, WikiLeaks revealed that despite Obama running pillar to post screaming hope and change, that the reality of it is Citigroup chose his cabinet positions. So I don't necessarily know why people wouldn't assume the exact same thing for Joe Biden, despite the COVID-19 taking place, and despite all of this noise about an FDR-type administration. Biden has been doing these big-ticket meetings, and in these big-ticket meetings has been basically having communications with people, either behind the scenes, which you would expect, but it should be assumed. I don't quite understand why people are shocked by this. Based on our history over the last 40 years, it should be assumed that these guys are involved in basically this kind of glad handing. Now, the interesting part is this line. Since defeating Senator Sanders for the party nomination, Biden has been making inroads with the Sanders coalition of progressive voters as part of a larger effort to unite the party to defeat Trump. Last week, the campaign unveiled the Biden-Sanders Unity Task Force, a coalition dedicated to developing new politics based on both candidates' platforms. Now, I've said before, you either back Medicare for all or you don't. You have 88% of Democrats that back that policy. It is astonishing to me that an argument can legitimately be made that the Democratic Party believes that Donald Trump is the walking apocalypse, but by the same token is not willing to accept political concessions to stop that person who they consider to be a walking apocalypse. Nevertheless, again, here we are. Now, it's this quote that I found to be the most precious thing in this article. The move should have raised alarm bells on Wall Street, which overwhelmingly views Sanders as a threat to financial stability for corporations and markets. Surprisingly, it didn't. Why are you surprised? Why are you surprised? I found that to be the most precious line. Surprisingly, this raised no eyebrows on Wall Street. Wall Street seemingly took no issue with this at all. Why? Why? Engage your mental faculties for the moment. Why would Wall Street not care about this task force? Wall Street doesn't care about this task force because Wall Street doesn't give any credibility to anything legitimately happening in this task force that's going to adversely affect them and their industry. That's why I don't even know why that's a shocking perspective to take. And yet the article is befuddled by the fact that the task force, or that Wall Street, is not responding to the task force and basically assumes, and I would say assumes correctly based on previous history, that Biden is going to come around, they're going to be sitting at the table, and all of those conversations that these guys had behind the scenes that is out of eyeshot, it's going to pay off. And it's going to pay off in spades, every bit as much as it paid off in the previous administrations. There's a potential, I suppose, that Biden will look at what has taken place regarding the COVID-19 and try to kick it up a notch. But this is the same guy who said he vetoed Medicare for all. This is the same guy and party that is against getting rid of student debt, despite the fact that over 70% of Democrats back it. I'm making the point that regardless of what they are saying, there is a history of the Democratic Party being real lefty when they're trying to get elected or when they're out of power. But the moment that they get in power, that hope and change takes a back seat to basically protecting Wall Street while letting homeowners go bust and giving 95% of the income to the top 1%. The reality of it is, more likely than not, at the very least based on our history in this country and our elections and what presidents do once they get in office, despite what they say, Wall Street is sitting on firm, rock solid ground here and believing that Biden will come around if Biden is not already around. Bob, I'm fascinated by this because I look at this and say, well, yeah, Wall Street knows what they're talking about. They're making the assumption that basically Sanders It's not going to get anything out of this. And they're looking at this, I would say, more pragmatically and rational, and think to themselves, if Biden was going to support those policies, he would have just supported those policies. If the Democrats were going to support those policies in that showpiece of a bill, they would have supported those policies. They didn't, which is what I strongly suspect Wall Street is looking at when they're making their appraisals.
Yeah, I mean, there's no guillotine-making committee there set up between Biden and Sanders. Like, you know, right. They're not like, how do we address the billionaire problem committee? You know, I mean, there's nothing that's going to come anywhere near that. They're not going to even talk about it, this stuff. So, yeah, why would you be concerned whatsoever? And those committees we've talked about for weeks now, Jamara, but they're showpieces, in my opinion. It's just pretty fancy ways to say, look, we're thinking about these issues. We're talking about these issues. We're obviously not going to do anything about these issues, but at least we're putting them out there to appeal to people. And that class struggle that you've been calling for, that other people have been calling for, that Bernie Sanders was trying to lead, is the first thing that got silenced by Joe Biden and his campaign the second that Sanders endorsed him. He said, thank you for being such a strong progressive and endorsing our campaign. He didn't say thank you for being a strong democratic socialist or a socialist and bringing these ideas of class struggle into the fold. Let's discuss them. He said, you're a progressive, which has no meaning whatsoever. Joe Biden can be a progressive. Anybody and everybody can be a progressive. To your point, Jamal, on the billionaire donors, no, they have to be laughing right now. I mean, it was like 66 at the last count I saw of billionaire donors that had committed to Joe Biden. There's some 600 plus billionaires here in the United States. So he has 10% of the billionaire support thus far. I'm sure he'll get plenty more of it as they go. The thing that's always crazy to me, Jamal, is here in Washington, D.C., the max donation that you can give to the mayor, I think, is like $1,000, and the max you can give to a council member is $500. And these wealthy millionaires, and I'm sure there's some billionaires obviously in the area, but these millionaires give such a small amount of money. It's only $500, but yet they get so much back in return from these council members, from the mayor and the Joe Bidens of the world. Obviously, the super PACs can run blind and just give endless money. But at the other end of things, some of these people just give thousands of dollars, and then these politicians bend over backwards for them. And so it is really surprising how little money can buy you so much from these politicians.
Oh, man, it's an amazing investment. I mean, and you were saying you thought they were show ponies also, that basically this was a face-saving maneuver in order to get lefties to back Joe Biden. Well, Wall Street sees it that way, too. So you're not in lurch with that. This is probably the one thing that you and Wall Street was saying side by side and says, yes, we agree on this very specific point. Yeah.
Yeah, and so much of it is about access and so many things beyond the politics that we see on paper. So much of it is the family vacations together to Martha's Vineyard. So much of it is the private lobbying job that you get after you're in office. Your kids go to the same school, or you want your kid to get into the fancy private schools. So all these perks come along with cozying up with these big money donors beyond just their money, Jamar. I appreciate Elizabeth Warren trying to call attention to the fact that lobbyists or former politicians shouldn't be able to be lobbyists, and trying to break up some of those insider pay to play politics that take place so often here in this country. But obviously Joe Biden's already been bought. He's already had the billionaire donors, and surely they're going to have an outsized voice regardless of how many task force Bernie Sanders can force him to create. Jamal, with that, we do need to take our first break. We'll talk a lot more about domestic politics over the next few hours. In the first hour specifically, we'll be talking about Trump's ongoing spat with the World Health Organization, how liberals are still not accepting that you have to win an electoral college to win back the White House, and the future of city budgets, and how you shouldn't expect a pay increase anytime soon if you work for the government. It's austerity time here on Political Misfits. And don't worry, Misfits, if that's not enough for you, we have a second hour after that. You're listening to Radio Sputnik live in DC. We're back after this.
Shooting from the lip.
We're taking no prisoners here. Real opinions for real people. Where we bring you people with controversial views, and instead of trying to catch them out, we actually let them expand on their views. What's going on in British politics, European politics, and indeed in world politics as well. And wherever you are, whether you're a UKIP supporter, a Tory or Labour, everything is in turmoil.
John Gaunt.
Shooting from the lip.
Corporate media spin got you feeling like a square peg in a round hole.
Join Political Misfits Bob and Jamal on Radio Sputnik for news and analysis that breaks out of the Tide red and blue paradigm.
Daily from noon to 2 Eastern Time on 105.5 in Washington, D.C.
or at 102.9 and 104.7 in Kansas City.
Welcome back to Political Misfits, the show that goes against the grain. I'm Bob Schlehuber here, sort of kind of with Jamarl Thomas. We continue to bring you live programming. We are at our homes, but a big shout out to our radio engineers for keeping us live with you daily from 12 to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Radio Sputnik. Hopefully you're listening to us on a range of different places every day, 105.5 FM here in the nation's capital. You can check us out on YouTube in the Progressive Soapbox. Make sure to like us there and share the feed with your friends. You can check us out on Sputnik News or on any podcast platform you listen to podcasts. Search for Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik and listen to us live or at any time throughout the day. We are here with you. Give us a call, 202-521-1320. Share what's on your mind. I know we'll be talking over the next hour about Trump's threatening letter to the World Health Organization and the latest investigation into Mike Pompeo's spending habits, as well as his selling billions of dollars of weapons habit, Jamarl, once you start selling weapons abroad, it gets really hard to stop. It's very, very addicting, to say the least. But we start here with the latest U.S. domestic politics. Here to join us for this conversation is one of our show favorites, Teresa Lundy, a communications strategist and principal at TML Communications. Teresa, welcome back.
Happy to be here. How are you guys doing in the COVID?
I'm all right. I'm all right. I know, Jamarl, how are you feeling, Jamarl? I don't want to speak for you.
Living, trying to get out this house, ready.
We're all itching to get back out there, so that's to say the least. Start here, and I apologize for the callousness of my question, as so many people are struggling with coronavirus, the economy, the general anxieties of being at home. But I want to talk about the state of politics here in the light of COVID-19. And I got to say, if I was a Democrat and you came to me 6 months ago and you said that in May of 2020, Donald Trump was going to be responding very poorly, to say the least, to a global pandemic, that the U.S. would be seeing record unemployment, over 80,000 people would have died from a preventable disease. And top of that, Donald Trump was blaming the World Health Organization for its failing, I would have been over the moon at my chances of winning back the White House in November. Yet, Teresa, for whatever reason, despite all of these things being true, there is no clear strategy from the Democratic Party, at least in my opinion, in how to win the moment and how the party will introduce grand and bold new ideas. Instead, we get Joe Biden in the basement or on his back porch with geese honking, and we get Nancy Pelosi dusting off policies that harken back to the 1930s. Teresa, am I being too critical of the Democrats? Is the current moment kind of beyond any of our politics, or should we expect more of our politicians to rise to the occasion?
She dropped.
So, Jamarl, as we get Teresa back on the line, let me ask you the same question. I mean, I know you've harped on the Democrats, and maybe it's kind of a giveaway what your answer would be. But for me, again, the best we can come up with is dusting off policies around the New Deal from the 1930s. You get Joe Biden in his basement or on his back porch or wherever he is. It just seems like this was an easy layup. I mean, what more could you have asked for? I mean, you had Donald Trump at 2-3% unemployment and the economy looking great. And then you're given this kind of softball to knock out of the park, and they basically are just swinging and missing.
Yeah, the only thing, look, I've said before, I think I said yesterday, the issue is not necessarily whether Biden can get Sanders supporters. The issue is, can he get them without giving anything in return? Whether this face-saving maneuver of the Biden task force or the Biden-Bernie task force, or for that matter, whether it's this nonsense that the Democratic Party is putting out, where they don't put out Medicare for all with, again, 88% approval. That's mind-blowing to me. Like, if you were in a political process and just schoolboy philosophy, you would have this thought that the policies that you guys represent would be the policies to some degree that the party would support. Otherwise, you have lost all tether to your political system and, for that matter, to your party. I don't think you're being too hard at all. I mean, these guys are not doing their jobs, and they should be called out for not doing their jobs. I agree with you, Bob.
Yeah, Teresa, before you dropped there, I'm not sure how much you heard, but I was basically critiquing the Democrats for the lack of response to Donald Trump's complete and utter failure. I mean, Donald Trump is in a much, much worse place than he was 6 months ago politically. The economy completely collapsing around him. He was at 2 or 3% unemployment. Obviously, those numbers are not accurate, but at least on paper and how they're presented in the media showed 3% unemployment. So this huge spike in unemployment. He's obviously not responding to the COVID-19 pandemic well, but yet Joe Biden has seemingly been lost in his at-home studio in his basement. It seems like he's relying on big press and big media as opposed to grassroots organizers, which is a whole other challenging thing in this moment. But it seems like the Democratic response has been lacking, to say the least. I wanted to know, is that a fair critique, or have the moment, the politics of the moment, been so beyond any of us that this is kind of the best we would expect from any opposition party?
You know what? I'm almost in agreement with you. I'm at a moderate approach, though, as it relates to VP Biden and his strategy in order to get out there. I think because, for me, especially as a Democrat, I'm always mindful of what the messages are, kind of getting to the point as where we are now. So the last message that the Democratic Party has put out is the unity ticket, right? How do we get the Bernie supporters onto the Biden ticket? And how do we unite the party? Great. So after the unification speeches, what are we now going to talk about? And so what it looks like is, Biden is almost at a scrap war, which he said he would never go on Trump's level. And I believe he called him earlier today, was like President Tweet, right? And it's like you're now, kind of conforming yourself into a person that you despise, and you just kind of lowered the bar, and that you set as professionalism, leadership, and ultimately responsibility. So it's pretty fascinating right now where the party is going. I think people are kind of getting comfortable, right? So we have Democratic consultants who are now pretty much just trying to pick their administrative positions. I have a lot of friends that are on the Biden campaign, but then I have, other friends who are on Trump's campaign, and they're like, listen, if we can't, do what we did in the past and talk and tout Trump's greatness, because obviously he is failing in the polls, then we're just going to spend the money. And they do know one thing about Trump's campaign. They do know there are people that can be influenced by the number that is on the check. And so I think, they're obviously utilizing those resources and just, breaking away from traditional party standards as it relates to the Republican Party. But the Democrats, yes, I believe they have lost the message, unfortunately, but I believe they are trying to work on strategy in order to come back. But I just believe there's too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah, and the Republican side of things, too, they're going to have more than enough money. Donald Trump's going to have a huge financial advantage throughout the race. And so how do you make up for the lost money that Biden's working with? And then, I'm very critical of Democrats. I've talked to a lot of people on this show about the failures of the Democratic consulting class, especially. These folks are more concerned right now about talking about what positions they would take in the administration than they are talking about how do we win voters over and speak directly to people's needs. And that says enough right there. And that's a pretty poor strategy to win when you're focused on having already won well before you get to the finish line. Teresa, before we get back maybe into the substance of what the Democratic Party is offering, they seem to also just be struggling with just easy communications things, like not having background sounds in their Zoom videos when they have Joe Biden going out. I don't know if he's using Zoom or whatever live video system they are using, but Joe Biden falling asleep at the wheel. We have cue cards being dropped by staffers. We have gaffe after gaffe. And on Sunday, we had geese. We had geese in the background. Have a listen here to this clip during this live event Biden's camp was holding.
Blinders off from most people. The people who weren't necessarily prejudiced, but just didn't focus. That's the geese you hear in the background. There's a little pond out here. And those Canadian geese are trying to get away from the virus. Anyway.
Teresa, he's talking about the need. He's talking about the need to focus while at the same time he's being distracted by geese in the background. As a communications consultant, this has to just drive you nuts that they can't figure out some of these basics.
It's sloppy. And, all these consultants that are talking about their position in the administration, we can't even hold a conference call without the geese chiming in saying, okay, you're done. It's basically the geese were giving the Democratic Party a signal and saying, listen, you missed the message here. Turn off now, right? And so we didn't get the message, but I hope they use that as a lesson. But again, there has been many other situations that has happened. And there was actually, I'm glad you brought up that clip. On Twitter, there was actually a group conversation that was happening. I was just following the streamline, and they're like, well, it kind of looks like VP Biden and his team was trying to make it seem like he was more relatable, more, like accidents happen. Oh, it's okay. And then I saw the other responses, and they were like, I don't know. It just seems a little messy. It just seems like somebody could have closed the screen door, and so it's a little knick-knack back and forth. And then they were like, he was obviously unprepared and missed it. So again, and these are hardcore supporters. If you go to the Facebook groups, the Twitter group, every group possible, they're all saying we're voting for Biden, but why are we looking, a little bit distracted in our messaging and how we move forward, with the party?
Yeah, I mean, Jamar, Barack Obama had people from around the country flying in, driving to other states, the battleground states, sleeping on strangers' floors, going out there for him, knocking in 100-degree weather down to sub-freezing weather in the snow to basically be able to lift him up over the Republican Party. And you have Joe Biden supporters saying, like, I'm going to vote for the guy, but I'm surely not going to go out of my way to promote him or drive to another state and sleep on somebody's floor to go door knock for him. But yet then at the same time, we're seeing these national polls come out, Jamar, where Biden's leading Donald Trump in head-to-head polling at a national poll level. And again, a bunch of liberals are just saying, oh, everything looks great. We're winning in the national polls. Obviously, they're ignoring the fact that twice in the past 2 decades, they've won the popular vote, but went on to lose the electoral college. It just seems like it's hubris at its peak level right here. We've already won What's My Job. The guy's a horrible candidate, but sure, he's going to win. We're winning in the national polls. Forget about the electoral college. It's basically just trying to convince yourself of every fact being something different than what it actually is.
And it's ignoring history, right? I mean, basically, Hillary Clinton had that same idea of, I'm winning all of these swing states, so I'm going to win this race. And what happened? Shattered. Utterly shattered. You have Hillary supporters walking out crying, not realizing what had actually took place. And so I agree with you on this. Not to mention you have 24% enthusiasm for Joe Biden. That number is so low. Like, it's hard to get across how low that number is. And that number has foretold doom in the past. Now, the catch here is COVID-19. If COVID-19 wasn't here, I think I would make the case that Trump was going to beat the stuffing out of Joe Biden. But the COVID-19 virus is here. Teresa, I'm curious. With the conversations talking about lefties not backing Biden, and also with the conversations talking about Latinos or his soft support in the Hispanic community, despite whatever the polls are showing, I mean, this could be somewhat troublesome in regards to trying to get Biden elected, correct?
I agree. A good friend of mine, she works at an news station, Telemundo here in Philadelphia, and she was just telling me, like, listen, I'm still waiting on a media ad buy from the campaign, that supports our demographic. She was like, and she's very connected, like groups and everything else before she went over to the television side, but whole activist and everything else. So she's like, the campaign just isn't communicating to our community. The only messages we're hearing is Trump. And we're not hearing anything from Biden, which, obviously leaves us in, kind of a dismay. She's like, we hear about the African-American plea. Right? She's like, but we're not hearing anything that, related to our issues of immigration and other things. And she's like, it's very disappointing. It makes, them not even want to go out and vote to an extent. I definitely pointed some things out on his website and stuff like that and called a consultant of mine. I'm like, hey, listen, you might want to engage this community or, put some efforts and resources to make sure that your message, and not only your message, but the bodies are clear. Your bodies need to be, to an extent, somewhere visible. Because, we're suffering through this COVID, but, there has to be some piece of literature or something that people know that, you have their best interest as well.
Yeah, Teresa, I want to talk to you during COVID-19. I think it's really a fascinating puzzle here that will be figured out, like us here in Washington, D.C. those of you in Philadelphia will vote on June 2nd. I'm curious what you make of the efforts there to ensure people have access to the ballots. For health reasons, voting commissioners have cut the number of polling places by 77% because of the coronavirus, meaning voters will be gathered at fewer locations than normal. This sounds good at first, but it also could lead to increasing crowds and health risk at some of the more centralized location. In response, Philadelphia election officials are distributing 92,000 absentee ballot applications and promotional flyers in food boxes given out across the city, an effort to reach low-income voters who they fear will risk their health to vote in person or skip voting altogether. Is this the answer in the moment?
It's not. I think so. The ballot position thing is every county is different. Every commissioner's office is different. Every county election board has a different plan and strategy. And so I can speak on the statewide race that I'm running. So I have 67 counties in Pennsylvania that I have to make sure that if it's an open endorsement, that I have one county that's going straight mail-in ballots. Then I have some. Here in Philadelphia, where more than 65% of the polling locations have closed down, right? So, and then outside of it being closed, how are they getting their message out to tell those who are still going to the voting, who plan to go out to the polling locations to vote, that, their vote is, that location is actually theirs to vote. I mean, so there's a lot of lack of communications that is happening in different counties, but I hope, that, and it, because I don't know, like this is honestly really hard for me to talk about. And I tell you why, because, the structure was never there. We've had the absentee ballot system for years, decades, really. Right. And I think the strategy for COVID-19, was thought of probably, in some of these counties, top of April, right? When we knew we were suffering through COVID in February, some in January. So, it's a bit disconcerting because, as much as we want to have fair and just elections and not think about voter suppression at all, these are some of the issues that are happening. And, another issue that I've actually found out was some of the individuals. So if you did the vote by mail online and say you didn't receive your ballot, but you say, since I didn't receive it, and you go to the polling location, you can still be, rejected from voting because you registered online, right? But you've never received your ballot. So these are just some of the issues that, I think it'll help incumbents. But also for those, new individuals, new candidates who want to run, I think it will also bring some viability because now it's sort of like a good playing field, I guess, in order, for them to kind of shine their light. But yeah, there's many issues with the mail-in ballot system in various counties that I've noticed, but I'm hoping, Democrats still turn it blue. Not only, socially, but also volunteering at their county commissioner's office to give them some help on the day of elections.
Yeah, I think the mail-in ballot is a great way to equalize the playing field and keep people healthy. But if you talk to ballot experts, it seems like it takes a few cycles to get the mail-in process right. I mean, you're adding all new staff that has to collect them, that has to open them, that has to tally them. You also aren't sure where people live, which we've seen a big problem with the Trump checks. God, I can't believe I'm calling it that. The branding worked. The $1,200 checks from the U.S. government, even getting those to the right mailboxes for a lot of people was very challenging if they had moved addresses or just weren't at that location to get their absentee ballot back in time. So a lot to play out there. Teresa, I wanted to ask you about one specific ballot question that I thought was really interesting in this moment there in Philadelphia. The Office of Labor, a yes vote on this measure means you would like to see this office become a more permanent department. Let me explain here one of two ballot questions coming up here in the Philadelphia. It says here, quote, shall the Philadelphia Home Rule Charter be amended to create a Department of Labor headed by a cabinet level director to enforce city laws that protect Philadelphia workers, to oversee labor relations such as collective bargaining with the city's unionized workforce, to investigate compliance with worker protections set forth in city contracts. So the voters there in Philadelphia will be asked if the Office of Labor should become a permanent department, yes or no. We've talked on this show a lot the last few weeks about whether or not there will be a strong economic movement in the moment. It seems like this is a great opportunity to see whether or not people are conscious of what's happening to workers' rights and if they are going to respond at the ballot box, which for me will foreshadow whether or not we'll see a strong economic movement into the fall or at least early in 2021.
Absolutely right. And I think that is a question. So one thing we don't do here in Philadelphia well is when those ballot questions come up, there is no media push in order for people to consciously, know about these questions and vote responsibly. Recently, I believe last year was the last year that until the law came in, that we had a, vote straight ticket. So Democrats no longer can do that. So that means if you were in the number one spot and it's a question that was on the ballot box, you could potentially, with that one click, get that question answered as a yes instead of a no. So now people are going to have to choose either, yes or no to it. But I think it's a great opportunity, like you said before, for the economic advancement. I do believe that we just need to, I think, on the local level, city council just needs to be a little bit mindful about the task force and the individuals that's on there that can critically think about, those issues that is dealing with the minority communities and some of the budgeting that also stems from that new position. But I think it's a great either way.
I'm curious. Speaking of the minority communities, you mentioned that the Latino or Hispanic communities weren't necessarily seeing Joe Biden making that outreach. From the standpoint of African Americans, has that outreach been there? I mean, and what I mean this in the sense that more than token push for this notion of African American support. I mean, Joe Biden basically ran around screaming that I got the black vote and was lying about his participation in the civil rights movement. I know he was lying because Joe Biden told me he was lying back in the 80s. So is there anything that goes beyond just this notion of token support where he would go on television with a Stacey Abrams or whether Hillary Clinton would go dancing with Mary J. Blige? Is there something more than this kind of, we covered the plan that Joe Biden came out with, the I can't think of the exact name of it, but we covered the plan that Joe Biden came out with. Now, that plan was not, let's call it sufficient in regards to the level of support that you would think that the Democratic Party gets for the black community. And in this very specific case, I am very curious about what African American organizers are talking about regarding the Biden campaign.
So funny. Well, one, I have to go back to the
Lift Every Voice. I think it's called Lift Every Voice plan.
Yes, it's the Lift Every Voice plan, but I have to comment on the Hillary Clinton sitting down with Mary J. Blige. It was the worst segment I ever saw. It was just like Mary J. singing to Hillary Clinton, so everybody needs to go watch that YouTube. It was hilarious. But yes, the Lift Every Voice plan, the Biden plan for Black America. Again, these are the same, and I read the plan. I think it's a great plan, but it's all about the execution of the plan, right? We've been told many of times that the plan for African American business owners and entrepreneurs and the capital is going to increase for businesses, that as it relates to participation in contracts, that, all of it's going to be more monitored and more make sure those efforts are built around it. But let's just be honest. I always look at those who are with these plans and their track record, right? So if you've been in office for me more than 2 decades and, we've been touting the same song, and had some strides, but not many. It has me question about, what is the implementation plan? Like, these are great, solid ideas. This is, what the people want, right? This is what we need at really everybody, not really just minorities, but everybody. But I believe there has to be an implementation plan. And I would have loved to see a part 2. This is how we're going to do it.
Yeah. Teresa, let me just interrupt you real quick there, because I think that's going to be the ultimate flaw of thought for the Democratic Party here, to run the campaign for Joe Biden through Barack Obama. If you go to Joe Biden's website, his YouTube video right now, the first video that they have pinned to the top is Barack Obama's 9-minute endorsement of Joe Biden. And what you're saying there, I think, is completely correct. If you're Barack Obama, you're in office for 8 years. You say all the good things that Joe Biden is now saying about all these different policies.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you look around, your material conditions at the end of the Obama administration had not changed whatsoever over those 8 years. There was obviously complete backlash towards Hillary Clinton, beyond just obviously Hillary Clinton was uniquely hated. But they basically, a lot of people said, you know what, the Democratic Party didn't deliver. I'm going to flip to Donald Trump. We had those swing counties that went Obama, Obama, Trump. And yet now it seems like Joe Biden simply saying, I'm going to run on the back of Obama, which for me has led to him not reaching out to Latino voters, because that has not gone well whatsoever when he said, I was part of Obama's administration, the deporter-in-chief conversation. And then this other conversation towards reaching black voters. I think a lot of black voters had enough of Barack Obama at the end of the day, and they didn't see their material conditions change. But yet here, Joe Biden's campaign strategy seems like, let's throw Obama out there as much as possible.
And you're absolutely right. I think they're going back to what worked, right? Again, if you put a Barack Obama in place, an African-American in position, talking about black issues, you now have the look of, this African-American man is going to do what he said he's going to do. But it was a little disappointing in 2012. As strides were made, they weren't made to the expectation of the American public. So, yes, he did have those going over to Team Trump, and now Trump has stay woke, and which is interesting to know. But I believe that, as they continue to strategize, I do believe that there is going to be a concerted effort for the Hispanic communities, to also get an outreach. But I just do believe it's going to be a little better. I would love to hear about their stories and not just, hear about what the campaign is doing, overall. But I would love them to specify some of their efforts in those communities that need it the most.
Yeah, I would love to see that as well, but I think they're already picking out wallpaper for their future offices in the West Wing, Teresa. Teresa, with that, we have to unfortunately put a pin in it. Thank you so much for joining us. That was Teresa Lundy, the communication strategist and principal at TML Communications. Teresa, where can people find more of you and your work online?
I appreciate you. You can always go to my website at tmlfirm.com, and you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at TML Firm.
Very cool. Thank you again. That was Teresa Lundy. With that, we take a quick break. You're listening to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik Live in DC. We're back after this.
We are above all the latest developments, and we don't take any sides. Radio Sputnik, telling the untold. Tune in to Loud and Clear with Brian Becker for the latest news, commentary, and political analysis. What's really behind the political and social crisis gripping the United States and the world? Forget the spoon-fed soundbites from the pundits who know so little about so much. We bring you independent experts, analysts, and activists. Learn what really makes the decision makers take from the boardrooms of Wall Street to the West Wing of the White House. Here is where the people fighting for change speak and are heard loud and clear, 5 days a week on Radio Sputnik and SputnikNews.com.
Welcome back to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik, where we bring you news, politics, and culture without the red and blue treatment. My name is Jamal Thomas. I'm here with my co-host, Bob Schlehuber. If you guys are digging what we were putting down, give us a like, give us a share. Also, your engagement is amply appreciated, so definitely give us a call at 202-521-1320. That is 202-521-1320 if you have anything on your mind. Keep it PG. So there's a few stories I want to get to, Bob. I think you're going to like these. Donald Trump announced yesterday, out of the blue, dropped the bombshell, that he was taking hydroxychloroquine, and he's been taking it for about the past 10 days. Let's hear Trump announce this very specific piece that got the press corps all engaged.
But I get a lot of tremendously positive news on the hydroxy. And I say, hey, you know the expression I've used, John? What do you have to lose? Okay, what do you have to lose? So I happen to take it for about a week and a half.
Every day?
At some point, every day. I take a pill every day. At some point, I'll stop. What I'd like to do is I'd like to have the cure and or the vaccine, and that'll happen.
Now, Trump has had multiple staffers to test positive. His doctor basically wrote a note saying that the president is indeed taking the anti-malaria drug. After numerous discussions he and I had for and against the use of hydroxychloroquine, we concluded that the potential benefits of the treatment outweighed the relative risk. White House physician Sean P. Conti wrote, he said Trump continues to test negative for the virus. Now, this drug is being used to treat malaria, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, and while Trump was really hot and heavy for this drug early on in the pandemic, he's cooled off it somewhat. Now, the drug itself is authorized for emergency use by the FDA for COVID-19 treatment, though the agency warns against using it outside of clinical trials because of potentially life-threatening side effects. Now, this does not seem in any way or there to be any public evidence that hydroxychloroquine works as a prophylactic, though testing is currently underway. There's also, of course, no evidence that Trump is actually taking this drug. I mean, his doctor wrote a note that's true, but this doctor continues to insist that Donald Trump is in good health, which, not so much. There's just no reason to believe a word that is coming out of this White House. So, is the president taking an unproven drug for a disease that he doesn't have? Sure, maybe, or maybe not. It's 2020, and it's just likely also that Donald Trump is basically taking this just to screw around with the press corps. They've been trying to argue that he was doing this for money. Now, what's another potential reason for this, Bob, that Donald Trump could be pushing this drug?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about his money not being directly tied, as many people thought initially, that he has some mutual funds that own part of the company that produces hydroxychloroquine. So that seemed kind of discredited. I think it's ego in some part of him having already come out here. He kind of touted it. He said it was right, and now he wants to try to basically double down on that. It's really funny to me, Jamal. I mean, one, I don't think he is actually taking it, which is like an incredible thing not to take, or maybe he's just taking like the tiniest like sliver of it just so he can like technically say. Did anybody ask him like what size the dosage was? Because he could just be taking like the tiniest sliver.
Good question.
So he's not lying, but obviously it's not to any degree. I'm going to also predict right now on the show that at some point over the next 2 months, he makes an international trip to somewhere where there is malaria, and he can say that he was just taking the hydroxychloroquine to protect himself against malaria like you're supposed to weeks ahead of a trip to an area with a lot of malaria.
Oh, you think he's going to back away from it?
I think so. It's pretty dumb.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. I mean, his doctor, that means that Donald Trump basically roped his doctor into lying for Donald Trump, which he's the president.
Well, I mean, his doctor, right, he's in the greatest health anybody's ever seen him, and said he weighed like 215 pounds, something absurd like that. I mean, so these doctors obviously are being paid quite handsomely to write whatever he wants them to write.
Fair enough, fair enough. So we have another story on Donald Trump being belligerent. Now, Trump basically sent a public letter to the World Health Organization saying that the review he'd called for in April had revealed even more quote-unquote serious concerns than the one expressed last month about the organization being quote-unquote China-centric. Now, this is the push. He's in campaign season, and Donald Trump, and for that matter, Joe Biden, has basically attacked China relentlessly. Now, Trump has been doing it in order to cover for his own failures. Biden has been doing it in order to, I got to be honest, I don't entirely know. I suppose to just get around Trump on this issue of China and tie him to something that Donald Trump has been basically bashing. Now, Trump accused the World Health Organization of, quote-unquote, ignoring credible reports of the virus spreading in Wuhan, claimed Taiwan reported human-to-human spread of the virus to the World Health Organization on December 31st, but the World Health Organization sat on that report. It's also accusing the World Health Organization of dragging its feet and sharing details about the virus structure. Basically, Trump is accusing the World Health Organization of covering for China in every way possible, with additional accusations that China tried to hide this virus. Now, I have to be honest. I don't know how China shut down an entire city larger than New York City, but is basically trying to hide the virus. Now, the letter says the White House is in talks with the World Health Organization about reforms that can lead to more, quote unquote, independence from China, but said if the changes aren't demonstrated within 30 days, the United States will cease funding for the organization and reconsider its membership. Now, Bob, this is in the middle of a pandemic where the World Health Organization is basically working with these other nations and other states. You have a situation where Donald Trump failed miserably, meaning the amount of hubris that this man is standing out here making this argument that you guys have screwed up. You guys are too China-centric. You guys were somehow messing this process up, and we have been hurt by your messing this process up. We have 90,000 people that are dead, Bob, and all of that can be put at the door of Trump because Trump knew about this going all the way back to January.
It's not what I heard.
Right. He did everything right, according to
Not what I heard. Not what I heard. No, I mean, it's incredibly on brand. I mean, we have to just remember the guy is pretty great at staying on brand with Donald Trump. Never has he just been like, you know what, I'm sorry for this thing. Never apologized, never back down. If you say something crazy and you get called out on it, say it twice as crazy and say it twice as loud. I mean, that's the strategy. And the brand that Donald Trump has been pushing so far is America first. So everything has to be America first. There is no working with the World Health Organization. There is no working with the United Nations. There is no working with NATO. There is no working with anything else out there in the entire world because it's America first. And so here he is in a situation, he can't say, look, we're going to work with the World Health Organization and other countries. That's off brand. And so regardless of what he thinks was the best thing to do, whatever we know is true, what all the facts that we can put out there, he simply has to continue with America first. We know best. We're the best. We should focus on us. Everybody else is bad. Everybody else is in the interest of other people. America first. And that's why he's successful. And that's why he's in the White House right now. You can hate him all you want, people. But the guy's in the White House because he stayed on brand, stayed on his message. As crazy as inconsistent he is, it's kind of like inconsistent is his consistent brand, Jamar.
It is. It's so bizarre, right? I mean, we've been told for the last, 40, 50 years that it is impossible for a president to get elected, let alone get through the primary process, running and behaving as Donald Trump behaves. And yet here he is. And, nobody can tell me that it is impossible for Donald Trump to win re-election any more than it was impossible for him to win the first election. And so that is his brand. And whatever you want to think about him, he will stay on that topic, even if it's against his interests, and even if he just needs to lie about it. That's Trump. I mean, it's an astonishing thing to look. The notion that a man that has 1.5 million cases of this particular pandemic, that knew about this going back several months, that had a mole in the World Health Organization. The mole is too strong. We basically contribute a lot of money to the World Health Organization, which is why Donald Trump is using this particular bit of leverage in order to stop them or in order to inhibit them in making his argument it's about China. But basically, having somebody in that organization, Americans, that were basically relaying information back to the United States, and Trump will stand here, and yes, I agree with you, Bob, lying is on brand, but he will stand here and make that case of, I did everything right, we did nothing wrong. This is an issue of the World Health Organization that was being too friendly to China, and this was China not sharing information. This is utterly astonishing, and yet here we are. There's another.
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead. No.
I was just going to say what's amazing about it too, Jamal, just real quickly. All he needs is some good news here and there to basically give his supporters enough of a semblance that he's in there doing something. And yesterday, I don't know if this is what you're about to share, but Moderna, the drug making company, announced that they had some good positive results on the first phase of testing for a vaccine for COVID-19. Obviously, this led to a huge jump in the price of the country. Their stock surged 20%. But Jamal, and let me know too here, the hope here, if you haven't heard it, was that the sample of 8 people developed the antibody. So 8 people so far gave this company about $30 billion boost in revenue all of a sudden, which is absurd. But Jamal, all Donald Trump needs is just a few good pieces of news along the way, some type of vaccine before November, and he can spin it that he was the hero that rescued all of us.
Yep, that's exactly what he was going to do. I shut down China before the virus. Joe Biden didn't want to shut down China. I was the guy that was right. And I predicted we were going to have a vaccine despite all of these other people saying we weren't. And I, Donald Trump, with my fashioned by my own hands, made this vaccine. Tell me he won't be running out there making that point. I mean, but to be fair, Joe Biden and Obama was screaming, Obama, Bin Laden died and Ford is alive. and ran with that as their mantra for the election. This is what presidents do. They take credit for things that they don't necessarily have control
Where's
over.
Obama's Ebola vaccine? Did he come up with that? No, absolutely not. He might have prevented it from coming here, but he didn't come up with the vaccine, did he?
No, he didn't come up with the vaccine.
It's that crazy, isn't it?
Well, here's the catch. I mean, the notion of a vaccine is not necessarily something that we may actually need. I mean, if you think of SARS, if you think, like you say, Ebola, many of these things eventually die off. They just kind of run their course in the way that we go about our ways. I don't know if this is going to be the same thing for COVID. I mean, they're talking about basically a second coming of this particular virus, and that is going to be basically around for a while. So it's hard to know how this is basically going to turn out from the standpoint of economics, but also from the standpoint of health. What I will say is that the World Health Organization should not be undermined in their objectives of trying to basically deal with this around the world. There's another story I want to go to before we finish. We're roughly about 5 minutes left. So yesterday, William Barr, Attorney General, comes out, and as you remember, there's been a lot of talk about Obamagate, that basically with the release of Flynn, that the argument is that the Obama administration in January 5th had a meeting about Flynn, and that based on unmasking and some of the other items that were released, that the Obama administration, potentially Joe Biden himself, knew about it, that this wasn't isolated to the way that the intelligence service was working. Now, Bill Barr, this gets such news that Barr comes out and gives a statement yesterday. Let's hear Barr's statement, because this statement is fascinating. Let's hear the clip.
Not every abuse of power, no matter how outrageous, is necessarily a federal crime. Now, as to President Obama and Vice President Biden, whatever their level of involvement, based on the information I have today, I don't expect Mr. Durham's work will lead to a criminal investigation of either man. Our concern over potential criminality is focused on others.
Now, Durham is a special prosecutor that Barr put on this case. Barr wanted this case to be legit, and so he put somebody that basically has a pretty decent reputation, so they wouldn't necessarily call this politicizing this case. Now, Barr coming out basically saying, look, yes, the president might have done something horrendous in the last administration, but doing something horrendous and something rabidly, let's say, not necessarily the best of politics in regards to what's fair and proper, does not necessarily make it illegal. That you can do things that are utterly atrocious that fit within the context of the law. And Barr made the point that he did not want to politicize this particular issue. Now let's hear Trump respond to this. Trump responds to Barr's comment. And I have to be honest, Bob, I actually agree with Trump here to some degree. Let's hear the clip.
What do you think of Mr. Barr's decision here?
Well, I think if it was me, they would do it. I think for them, maybe they're not going to. I don't know. I'm surprised because Obama knew everything that was happening. I don't think Obama knows where he is in a lot of ways. I saw his statements the other day, and I think that, frankly, they weren't very good. It's President Obama. As far as Biden's concerned, I can't tell you. Only he knows what he knows. I don't think he knows too much. But I think Obama and Biden knew about it. They were participants, but so I'm a little surprised by that statement. I don't think he said it quite the way you said it. I think he said, as of this moment,
Bob,
I guess.
whatever Trump wants.
But if it was me, I guarantee they'd be going after me.
Whatever Trump wants. Basically, Barr is not having it.
No, and I think William Barr is somebody that respects kind of the institutions of America, whatever you think about those, enough to say presidents, past presidents, vice presidents, they're off limits. Because if we go after one of the presidents, former presidents, then they're all going to be drugged back in there tomorrow. So, yeah, I think obviously the rhetoric has to be consistent with Donald Trump calling out Barack Obama at all moments, but I don't think it's going to go anywhere regardless of whatever unmasking Obama did. I think the criminal actions were much more focused on what the FBI was doing with the FISA courts and illegal surveillance of U.S. citizens.
Agree. Absolutely agree. So
yeah. Well, Jamar, we'll talk more about this. I do think it's really interesting, and obviously we're looking forward to seeing who the criminal charges that Barr is referring to are brought up. We have to put it in pin in it there for this first hour, but don't worry, we have another hour of news, politics, and culture after this short break. In the second hour, we talk about Barack Obama's commencement speech. I might have to go back to school to articulate my words. Rockford Public Schools, shout out to you guys for doing a so job with me. Their commencement speech, horrific and troubling photos posted on Snapchat of Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia after he was lynched. And in our weekly Politics of Art segment, we take a look at the art of political ads. You listen to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik live in D.C. We're back after this.
Listening to Radio Sputnik, telling the untold.
Welcome back to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik, where we bring you news, politics, and culture without the red and blue treatment. My name is Jamal Thomas. I am here with my co-host, Bob Schlehuber. Let's keep going against the grain. We still have a lot to cover over the hour, including Politics of Art segment. As always, your chats, tweets, and calls are amply appreciated. You can reach us at 202-521-1320. Also, if you're digging what we're putting down, be sure to like and share this video. So a couple of days ago, I got the opportunity to watch a speech that Obama gave that went viral, basically calling Trump handling of the COVID-19 virus incompetent. Now, I strongly suspect that 3 a.m. between Trump and his God, even Trump will have to come to some level of conclusion about his own flamboyant ineptness. Now, this wasn't necessarily news to me. No, the thing that caught my attention and drew a certain degree of ire from me was a comment that Obama made after going after Trump that was basically drawing a condescending circle around African Americans and pulls them out as a community in order to highlight what they should be doing during the pandemic. Now, I wanted to get another opinion on this, an opinion that I valued, and so I brought on my next guest. Unfortunately, she was available. To discuss, we're joined by editor and senior columnist at the Black Agenda Report and author of the book Prejudicial: Black America and the Presidents, Margaret Kimberly. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be back.
Absolutely. So I think you've had the opportunity to hear the commencement speech at this point. It went viral. Now, I have no issue with the comment on Trump. None. We are seeing, 90,000 people dead with 1.5 million people infected by the virus. Now, Trump kept saying that this will be over with in something like a month when this started. So no issue at all going after Trump, calling him incompetent. The part that I had issue with, again, was this area, this weird divergence into the black community. Let's hear the clip of Obama bringing up what African Americans should be doing during this pandemic.
As African Americans, we are particularly attuned to injustice, inequality, and struggle, but that also should make us more alive to the experiences of others who've been left out and discriminated against. So rather than just say, what's in it for me, or what's in it for my community, and to heck with everyone else, stand up for and join up with everyone who's struggling, whether it's immigrants, refugees, the rural poor, the LGBT community, low-income workers of every background, women who so often are subject to their own discrimination and burdens and not getting equal pay for equal work. Look out for folks whether they are white or black or Asian or Latino or Native American.
I don't know how many people are hanging around Obama. I mean, Obama is a millionaire at this point. I have no idea how many people, African Americans, are hanging around Obama, making the point of, hey, I just want something for me and screw everybody else that's a part of this process that's taking a hit from this virus. I thought that was such a weird comment. Margaret, what's your perspective of this? Without me going too far into how I view this, I am curious about your perspective of this speech in general, but also this very specific part where he, for whatever reason, draws emphasis around the black community?
Well, it's typical of him. I think it's fair to say, it's accurate to say, Barack Obama does not like black people very much as a group. His comments about it constantly scolding, constantly disparaging. So this is part of a pattern going back to when he first ran for president in 2008. So I'm not surprised at all, but I think people need to stop giving him a pass about this. No one has said that black people don't or should not care about anyone else. But you see what he does. If he ever mentions us specifically, he always has to add something negative, a negative inference that black people don't care about anybody else or that we're not active. So this is pretty typical of him, but it is very, very, it's annoying at the very least. But it's something I've noticed all these years, and I'm not at all surprised that he would say this.
I just found it so bizarre. What do you think his reasoning for this? I mean, I take this as a political speech because he's basically going after Trump. And so adding this in, I also took this as somewhat political jargon in the way he just kind of made this weird assumption that blacks didn't care about other groups, so much so that he had to actually pull them out of the human group and human community of this country in order to point at them and say, yeah, you guys need to make sure that you care about other groups also. What was his point in doing this? I found it so odd.
Well, I think it's his personal feeling about black people. I think his attitudes about us as a group are the attitudes of white people, many white people about us. So I think it's a genuine feeling on his part, but I think politically, again, he wants to make sure that he is not connected with the rest of us and that he can find ways to separate himself and get buy-in from white people. He talks over our heads straight to white people. So this is what he's been doing when he first ran, and he always looked for an occasion to disparage black men and say they weren't good fathers and were basically lazy bums, or his attacks on Reverend Wright. It was the same thing. So it's only odd if you don't see it as part of a long-standing pattern.
Yeah, it's really interesting how much of the conversation around black voters, I really think, and I agree with you, Margaret, is more playing at white voters' guilt, or whatever white voters want to hear. They want to hear that they're a part of a party that is inclusive of black people. So it's not actually about black people when a lot of these politicians talk about black voters, but it's actually appealing to a certain segment of white voters who want to be part of that kind of cool movement that includes black people, even though they have no black friends. They're not engaged in any organizing that is diverse and inclusive. And I think you're hitting the nail on the head. As for Barack Obama in this speech, I mean, he's given this speech so many times before. He really does feel like he needs to be the dad to black America, telling people, the young kids, to pull up their pants and not to wear these gold chains that they see in hip hop videos. But yet, at the same time, Jamal, he'll be up there with a Rolex watch on that costs thousands of dollars. Is that not some type of status purchase that you're trying to show off how much money you have? And so it is this kind of politics of respectability. Wear a suit, stand up straight, speak into the camera and into the microphone. Don't exhibit any of your personal culture, your own experience. It's not about that. It's about being a business person, an administrator, a leader. And I think that's what Barack Obama is focused on. And he's been very intent that the Chicago work he's doing now with his library is to train the next leaders of young black America. And that's very frightening, because once young black people or young white people, for that matter, any race, are brought into the politics of the Democratic establishment or into establishment politics, you really lose a lot of good people that are no longer going to be on the front lines doing the service work that we don't desperately need. They just think that if they're in a suit, they're giving fancy speeches and people are applauding for them. That's politics in America, and that's Barack Obama's politics. And so that's what he wanted to share at that commencement speech. And I agree with you, Jamar. It was just disgusting. It was on par from what the former president has said while in office and since leaving.
I mean, not to mention, let's be very clear. Obama threw blacks under the bus for Wall Street, meaning all of this black wealth that went in the toilet under the Obama administration because he let homeowners basically go bust. This is the same person that was a flagrant pot smoker, but wouldn't get rid of or expunge the records for people with pot. I mean, I guess not to mention the 95% of the income to the top 1% is horrendous. That is utterly and entirely atrocious. And so, not to mention the water, meaning Obama couldn't even be bothered to ensure that people who voted for him in spades got clean water. So, I have feelings about Obama in the way that he talks about this stuff, and I agree with you. I'm curious, what do you think the perspective of Obama going to be in 10 or 15 years by specifically African Americans? I had a conversation with one guy one time, and a black guy, and he said, I don't think the black community was ready for a black president. And his basic point was we did not have the ability to criticize him the way that we needed to criticize, and basically gave him a free pass. What do you think in 15 years? A, do you think that's true? And B, do you think in 10 or 15 years, what do you think the perspective of our community is going to be towards that president?
Well, I think this you're referring to is correct. I think in 15 or 20 years, sad to say, unless there's some revolutionary change, I think perceptions of him will be the same. We still find it very hard to free ourselves from this pride and joy we feel in seeing the black face in a high place. And it's understandable. I experience it myself sometimes, so it's all right if you, but this, we're talking about the presidency here. So if you want the black person to win an Oscar or get the Olympic gold medal or some other accolade, okay, I get that. But we're talking about someone who still has a lot of, even as a former president, still wields a lot of power. And our critique of him, first of all, we need to have a critique of political leadership. Black people we're wedded to the Democratic Party, in part because white people are wedded to the Republican Party, and it's our means of harm reduction, so to speak. But we cannot be passively Democratic, and we have to. We're in this terrible situation with this campaign where we fear and loathe and hate Donald Trump. But our response was, again, to be passive with the Democratic Party, instead of having our own agenda, instead of making our own demands, to just sit back and see who was determined to be most electable and listen to the people who were wrong about electability in 2016. And we end up with Joe Biden, who is a train wreck for a multitude of reasons. So I'm not that optimistic that those perceptions are going to change. And a lot of the animus towards Obama was racist. So that is another thing that produces this reflexive support of him.
Yeah.
But I think a black president was not a good thing for us. I think it was very detrimental to our politics and, frankly, to our mental health, too.
Well, this topic is bringing in callers. So we have Uncle Brother on the line. What's going on, Uncle Brother?
Greetings. Always a pleasure to speak with my brother, and my brother Bob, and of course, Sister Kimberly. Oh my goodness, it's every time I hear you, it's absolutely amazing. So I wanted to speak as someone who drank from the overly super sweetened pitcher of Obama Kool-Aid for 2 terms, and that I 100% agree with all of the criticisms and the critiques that you've been leveling so far. I just wanted to add my little 2 cents about why he would say something you mentioned earlier, why he would say something to black people about not caring about other people. And I believe that could be coming from growing amount of criticism coming from the equally growing group of folks identifying as ADOS, American descendants of slavery, because it's a very critical message going towards Mr. Obama, which I can't say that I disagree with, but they say that he, should not. He's not because he's not a descendant of American slavery. He does not relate to the group, and as a group, the message with ADOS is we have to there's a intense push towards the argument towards reparations. And they say, well, we have to push this agenda, we have to push this black agenda, push this reparations argument before we worry about anything else. It's not that that there's no concern about other groups, but let's put our concerns up, first and foremost. And I know a lot of people don't like that aspect of the ADOS argument, but I think that's probably why he may have gotten wind of that, and why he might say something like, well, black people should care about more than, just themselves. What do you think about that?
Thank you, Uncle Brother. I have to be honest, that's why I thought this was condescending. I look at our world, and you have a marginalized community, and on top of a marginalized community, you have a situation where many of these people are dying from COVID. You have income inequality. I mean, you have one issue after the next that's drastically affecting this community. And I took this as a political statement where basically he was making an argument for all of these people who kept saying we want a black VP, or the Democratic Party is taking blacks for granted, like Puffy made that argument. I thought that's where this was coming from, in a very specific political sense of trying to cover this notion of backing Democrats or expecting anything out of a party that you back. We have one more caller. Charles. What's going on, Charles?
Hey, what's up, man? I just wanted to add on, man. I was very disappointed in Obama. I voted for him both times, 08 and 012. And the thing about it is, like, he never he got a pass on all that stuff, man. Like the stuff he did with Muammar Gaddafi, the stuff he did, with the drones of civilians. It's like the hypocrisy in criticizing Trump and Republicans for that stuff and giving him a pass. It's like his name should be toxic. He shouldn't be getting, Joe Biden shouldn't be winning the black vote from associating with Obama. That should be why he's losing it, because of all the things you just named, like, the wealth going to the 1%, all that stuff. He never got he totally get a total pass on everything. It's like, I knew this was true about Republicans and right-wingers, but 2016 and 2020 is making me realize that we have the same kind of blind loyalty on our side, too. And I don't know what it'll take to break through it and get people to see straight. People either see it where they have to defend Obama to the hilt or defend Trump and Republicans to the hilt. And people just lost their way of critical thinking, it seems like. It seems like nobody can see this for what it is, like totally corrupt. Everybody thinks it's a one-sided or partisan thing when it's really systematic. And I don't know why people can't see it. I don't know why Trump get a pass on everything or Obama get a pass. And nobody can see that they all are corrupt and they all a problem.
Thank you, Charles. Margaret, would you like to respond?
Yes, I definitely agree with the second caller. Obama was got away with things that black people would never have accepted from a white president. He mentioned the destruction of Libya, the killing of Gaddafi. If nobody defended Gaddafi and other leaders that the United States government told us not to like, black people would do it. That's just one of many examples. And politics now is very personal, so that seem to feel that they have to love some person and treat them like they're a friend or a relative or something, instead of having what we should have, which is an adversarial relationship with political parties and political leaders. You can't love any of them too much. But I find that's unfortunately true for people of a variety of political perspectives. As for the first call, if we had more time, I would talk about my feelings about this ADOS organization, which I have a lot of issues with. And that is my background, I hasten to add. But I don't think Obama's, the fact that his father was not an American, was an African immigrant is the issue. Obama was he was raised by white people, and I think that's something that is obvious when he makes these comments. He sees us the way white people see us. And so that is the reason that I would point that out. And so we get the constant scolding, we get the negative remarks, we get singled out for criticism. Among all the people he mentioned, we were the only ones that he criticized. All the other people, he didn't ask any of them to make common cause with other people. We're the only ones that he mentioned in that statement. So I think people need to. He's not president anymore. You don't, even if you feel like you have to defend him, he's not running for office again. So it's possible to wake yourself up and stop being so devoted to this man. But I believe, unfortunately, that this love affair is going to go on for many more years, sadly.
We have another caller on the line. Ali. What's going on, Ali?
Hey, how you doing? I mean, I'm very interested in the conversation. Yeah, I've thrown this question to historians, and they weren't able to answer it. And the question is, who was the first president that black population in the United States had the so-called legal right to vote for? And most can't answer, but I'll answer it really quickly and just say it was Ulysses Grant. And the reason why so many blacks voted for him, and to the tune of 400,000 in the 1800s, in the 1860s, was because it was his job to protect the freedoms, the newfound freedoms of the African American population. So when you see all of these circles in the cities with these generals on them and things, these were Union generals, most of them, that were assigned to field positions to stop the Southern armies from coming back in and putting the blacks back into slavery during the Reconstruction. So Ulysses Grant had 2 terms. So he served for 8 years, and it was only after he lost, I think it was to Hayes, I can't remember exactly, that these federal protections, these generals, these Union generals were removed. And then you saw the Klan and the Southern armies, and then, you know, the Jim Crow laws and the black codes come into full play upon the black population. But it was only after the Reconstruction was completed. They needed a population to rebuild these cities because they were completely destroyed. So we got the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendment to keep us working during this period of time. So even then, in the 60s, the black population knew what the vote was about. It wasn't about skin color. It was about benefit. And so he had a platform to benefit us in some way. If you're going to protect me and make sure that I have the right to live, the right to freedom, justice, and equality, which is what we all want, you're going to do that in some kind of form, I'll give you my vote, but not just because your skin is black or your skin is white. And by the way, he was a Republican. So not because you're a Republican or a Democrat. You have to understand what the platform is, and I'll stop there. And I appreciate your topic today. Thank you.
Margaret, would you like to comment? There's one more caller. In fact, let me get the caller in, save your comment, and I'll bring you in to talk about both. We have one more caller, DJ. What's going on, DJ?
Hey, how's it going, Jamal and Bob?
Hey,
yeah. Oh, sorry for that.
DJ?
Hey,
DJ? Oh,
I do not think it's about race, to be honest. I don't think it's about race as much as it's about wealth, like the last caller mentioned. What bothers me about Obama in general is he's an individual that makes people disarm themselves. You know, the current caller right now, what she said, absolutely right. he was raised by people who view blacks through a particular lens, and he shares that sentiment because that's how he was indoctrinated. His socialization was, these people are like this. So even if he has no real malicious intent, that may be like his natural response to black people and the things we do. Now, on the other hand, it's possible that he could, like, let's say you had a family member who was doing drugs. He was doing crack, if I can say that on the air. You would look at that and you would be very concerned about that. You'd point that out, as opposed to if someone down the street was doing, you'd be like, oh, that sucks that he's doing crack. You're not going to be as critical. So that's also a possibility. I don't want to, just align him with some sort of malicious intent with the things that he does. But what does bother me is that lack of, you said it best, Jamar. I'm sorry, I always say enunciate the L, but the inability to be critical of a person because you're looking at a group, you're looking at an identity as opposed to policy. Because there are people that Ron Paul had much better policy than Obama, in my opinion. You know, you look at JFK, he was assassinated because he wanted to do things for people. He said he was for a transparent government. He said, listen, scrutinize what we're doing. Watch us carefully. You know, and then you look at like Abraham Lincoln, even though, like, I think Abraham Lincoln was a terrible person too. Also, that's a whole other thing. I know that may sound odd, but he was a racist. He was a racist. The only reason the whole Emancipation Proclamation, he really was. He said, I don't see blacks as equal, and I feel that superior positions to be given to white people. And he said this. The whole purpose of the Emancipation Proclamation was to get rid of black people because they were revolting. That's it. And that communicates to something I've kind of been noticing. Violence, or the threat of violence, is something that's what liberates people. You know, I've been hearing, I'm getting so off topic. I'm sorry. Obama disarms people. That's why he's bad, because his policies, as brilliant as he is, and his policies favor rich people. That's it.
DJ, those are all really, really fascinating points and really good points. Thank you for calling. As always, we always love to hear from you. Margaret Kimberly, I'm curious your response to the last few calls.
Yes, well, both of them are giving me a segue to shamelessly plug my book, Prejudential, Black America and the President. And I write about all 45 presidents. And yes, Lincoln was succeeded by Andrew Johnson, who was horrible, a Southerner, a former slave owner, and then Ulysses Grant. Black people were Republicans for a long time because Democrats were the party of the segregated South. So that caller makes a good point about Reconstruction. The second gentleman said is what he said is correct. Where black people did disarm themselves and still do, to not just to Obama, but to this whole class of black politicians. At blackagendareport.com, where I write, we refer to them as the Black Misleadership class. And they all in some way mirror what Obama does. They are allegedly working on our behalf, but they work for the interests of rich people. And of course, Obama is now rich, just as Bill Clinton is now rich. That is their reward for doing the bidding of the 1% while they are in office. And that is why we must have an independent politics that is separate from our support of any person or any political party. If we don't do that, we just get the bum's rush, and we end up being gaslighted at having to support some horrible person like Joe Biden, who in all probability isn't even going to be able to win. Absolutely. So I appreciate both callers.
Absolutely agree. We have one more caller. Keith. What's going on, Keith? You have 30 seconds.
Fantastic show. Haven't heard out of you guys lately. I haven't called, but real quickly, your guest is fascinating. Just 2 points. I want to ask her a question. What in the hell good are the Black Caucus members of the U.S. Congress, and what have they done lately for anybody? And number 2, my comment is Barack Obama wasn't the first black president. He was the first acceptable black president. This is a view held by many people. I didn't create it. And that basically he never said he was a progressive. He used, things go better with Coke, marketing. In fact, Madison Avenue gave his campaign the first time award for PR. He stole Sam Cooke's change is gonna come, the famous singer, and made everybody feel touchy-feely. But to his credit, he never said that he was a progressive or liberal. So he didn't lie. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the call, Keith. So, Margaret, any comments on that?
Yes, well, the CBC, the Congressional Black Caucus, doesn't do anything. The Democratic Party is the party of corporate interest at home and the party of imperialism abroad. They do not represent their constituents in any way that is meaningful. They are symbols of what we want, and so I referred earlier to the admiration of the black face in the high place, and there they are, some 40-odd people who supposedly support us, but they really do not. So to answer this question, it's been a very long time since the CBC, once called the conscience of the Congress, has done anything deserving of that label. And it's true, Obama was marketed. If you paid attention to him, he let you know he wasn't really against war. He talked about his admiration for Ronald Reagan. So on one side of his mouth, he spoke to those people who were more conservative, and while at the same time having this amazing marketing effort that allowed people to see in him whatever it was they wanted to see. He could be whatever person viewing wanted him, whatever they wanted him to be. So if they wanted to see a progressive, they were able to see a progressive. And I remember them saying in 2008, it's a movement. Well, no, it wasn't a movement. It was a political campaign. But they convinced millions of people that he was something he was not. This is an important and powerful lesson, and I hope that we heed it for the future.
Yeah, it's amazing to be kind of an amorphous blob of a political character that allows everyone to project their best selves onto it. And Barack Obama was able to capture that with being a great orator and coming up with the right political messaging. Jamar, we're going to talk more about that in our next segment in the politics of art, looking at campaign messages and ads. That Obama Yes We Can video in 2008 really kind of changed the calculus about how celebrities and music and culture were integrated into our politics. And he was able to trick a lot of people into thinking he was something that he wasn't. Big thank you to all of our callers over the last half hour. Always great to hear from all of you. And a big thank you to Margaret Kimberly. Margaret, we're out of time with you, but you have a lot of great reports and more radio work there at Black Agenda Report, and you have a great book out. How can people find more of you and your work online?
blackagendareport.com. We publish every Wednesday. I'm on Twitter, Freedom Ride blog. Book is Prejudential, Black America and the President. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it on Barnes & Noble. You can get it straight from the publisher, steerforthpress.com.
Fantastic. Again, big thank you to Margaret Kimberly. With that, we do need to take a quick break before we come back to look at the latest campaigns ads, or more accurately, the campaign attacks against Donald Trump and Joe Biden in our weekly Politics of Art segment. You're listening to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik live in D.C. We're back after this.
Feeling kind of blue, but maybe also kind of red, and kind of purple, and kind of alone? You've got a friend on Radio Sputnik. Tune into Political Misfits from 12 to 2 Eastern Time, Monday through Friday, for news, politics, and culture without the two-party bias. Catch us daily on 105.5 in Washington, D.C., or 102.9 or 104.7 in Kansas City. Or find us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your news.
On Sputnik with Max Kaiser and Stacey Herbert. Tune in.
Well, maybe mention like central bankers and markets are doubling down. Not you were saying everybody's doubling down. They're crazy.
They are. Everyone's crazy.
Welcome back to Radio Sputnik, where we bring you news, politics, and culture without the red and blue treatment. I'm Bob Schlehuber here with Jamarl Thomas. That music means it's time for our weekly Politics of Art segment, where we take a look at the latest pieces of art and trends in the world of art and how they interact with your daily politics. Jamarl, we're going straight at the intersection of art and politics today. I want to take a look at the art of political ads. I'm a huge political ad nerd. I love them. I love the imagery. I love the small choices of when to use a female voiceover versus a male voiceover. When do you go on to attack with an ad, and when do you highlight your strengths? I love the lighting choices and the darker, uplifting music choices. So much go into these ads. It's quite remarkable that you can pack so much into a 30-second or a 1 minute ad. And Jamarl, these campaign ads often go and linger well beyond the campaign that they're used in the public consciousness. I know I remember Lyndon Johnson's 1964 Daisy spot, and that ran 22 years before I was born. And I also remember pretty distinctly Ronald Reagan's 1984 Morning in America ad, which ran 2 years before I was born. But I'm still terrified to the man this day. So these ads, it's remarkable, can last in the public political consciousness for decades after they first air. And other attacks and ads, they can actually destroy people's image for the American public for quite a long time. George W. Bush had his devastating windsurfing ad against John Kerry, which forever cast Kerry as a flip-flopping, rich, out-of-touch elite politician in the minds of the American populace. I mean, he was all of those things, so it makes sense that it stuck, but the ad obviously drove the point home. And more recently, as we mentioned in the last segment, Barack Obama's 2008 Yes We Can ad brought political campaign ads to a whole new level with combining the candidate's own words with music, celebrities, and history. Jamarl, I love these ads and the artistic choices that go behind them. And I wanted to take a listen to some of the most recent ads put out by the Trump and Biden camps and get your reaction. Give us a call, 202-521-1320. I'd love to hear about your favorite all-time ads or any of the political ads that we're about to play and get your thoughts on them. Do they move the needle for you whatsoever? Jamarl, let's first start with a few attack ads put out by the Trump camp against Joe Biden. This first one is called Shattered.
I would see him at meetings and he would basically put his hands on me, put his hands on my shoulder, run his finger on my neck. He was very handsy with a lot of people. There was no exchange really. He just had me up against the wall and then his hands were on me and underneath my clothes. He went down my skirt, but then up inside it. He was kissing me at the same time and he was saying something to me. How I was pulled back and he said, "Come on, man, I heard you liked me." And for me, it was like everything shattered in that moment.
Wow. Yeah, I mean,
That's
Jamarl,
brutal.
This one, yeah. And it's so different than the past ones. And we're in a state of politics like we've never seen before in the past. You know, that 1964 Lyndon Johnson one was basically saying Goldwater was not the leader you would want in office to stop a nuclear attack. And all these other ads kind of focus on the ability of a candidate to be presidential or not. And this is where you're going to see the first time the very personal, very direct attack that we just heard. And that one, it kind of really sticks with you. And if you can see the imagery of Joe Biden touching and sniffing young people's hairs and putting his hands on other people's shoulders, I think these are effective ads that are going to stick around.
Yeah, that ad may stick. I mean, so some of the polling showed that the majority of the public actually believe Reid's claim. Well, the catch becomes whether or not they will make a choice to not vote for Biden despite believing that claim. And that's where it boils down to, I think. Basically, you have a large number of people who basically say, look, I believe Tara Reid, but Donald Trump is a monster, so I'm going to vote for Joe Biden regardless of what Joe Biden did. And I think that's where, but within the margins of those people who will be affected by that ad is massively effective. That's
and the fact that he was able to use, and this is where you kind of talk about the male versus female voice, and oftentimes you kind of use the female voice to go on the attack so it doesn't sound as brutal or as blunt, and then you can use the male voice to sound more reassuring. There's certain cues that you can give off within these ads, and he's using people that speak directly about Biden. These aren't voiceovers. These are people's actual lived experiences with Joe Biden. I think that's why this ad was so powerful. Let's get to the next one here. If you don't have enough of the sexual assault conversation and basically being able to use these women's voices, you'll have plenty of Joe Biden himself in his own voice throwing out gaffe after gaffe. Here's the next one. Joe Biden attack ad by Donald Trump titled "Truth Over Facts."
My name's Joe Biden. I'm a Democratic candidate for the United States Senate. Corn Pop was a bad dude. I'm not going nuts.
You'd be the oldest president in American history.
Are you Winston Churchill? All right, Chuck. Thank you very much.
It's Chris, but anyway.
It would put 720 million back in the workforce. We choose truth over facts.
That's
Jamal,
brutal.
it seems again an incredibly effective ad there. You're not even having to use a voiceover or a script. You're just using Joe Biden's words himself.
Did he really say Winston Churchill when he said the oldest? That is mind blowing. Oh, that's mind blowing. Winston Churchill wasn't even a president; he was a prime minister, and not to mention in another country, which is more pressing than the fact that he was never president. That's amazing.
But it seems, I mean, what do you think about the effectiveness, again, of using not using actors or voiceovers, but using Biden's own words and these women's words? It seems like they're incredibly effective messaging.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's more direct. I mean, it's one thing to have a voice actor who may be making a funny thing, but it's one thing to hear the person's own words in their, giving their own story. And whether that's Biden's own words where you're like, oh my God, this guy is not up to snuff, or whether that's Reed's where, honestly, that story is pressing. It stays with you. I mean, that Reed video really does stay with you, even though I think both of them are brutal. Maybe it's my own bias.
These are, well, I mean, let's also note how good these are in this. I mean, and again, not saying good as in I'm taking any political judgment, but effectiveness and politicking your message. But these both messages come with heavy video that we're not seeing here on the radio, obviously. These aren't even the radio ads they're putting out. These are incredibly effective, just the audio. Let's do one more Donald Trump produced campaign ad attacking Joe Biden. Then we'll at least give Joe Biden a few opportunities to go back on attack with a couple of videos after this. Let's compare back to back here. First, an attack ad on how Joe Biden has responded to coronavirus, and then we'll take a quick break before we're coming back to see how the Biden campaign has attacked Trump on COVID-19. But first, here's an attack ad on Joe Biden regarding the coronavirus.
During the coronavirus pandemic, Joe Biden criticized President Trump's China travel ban.
Hysterical xenophobia.
He was dead wrong. For 40 years, Biden's been wrong on China, supporting trade deals that destroy American jobs, giving China most favored nation status, letting China walk all over us.
What a beautiful history we wrote together.
But Biden has never been more wrong than now. Joe Biden in the White House would be a deadly mistake.
Deadly mistake.
Deadly mistake. So there you can hear the difference there when you have a voice over actor, slightly kind of a different message and a different feel to it. It does really kind of give you that prescient thing. There's a crisis. That music makes me feel like there's a crisis. There's an urgency to it, and this guy's failing at the job. What do you think about the effectiveness of that?
Yeah, I like that. It's funny. It's kind of frenetic, I guess. Like, it's somewhat all over the place, but you really get his point, right? That Joe Biden basically is not up to the job of president. And, a deadly mistake. Like, deadly is so over the top. It's like, it's a deadly mistake. It's not even accepting him as, like, just a comparative person in this. No, I am Donald Trump. Joe Biden is a deadly error for president. He's not mincing words.
So let's get to the response now. Here is not necessarily the response ad, but it's a sister ad here from the Biden campaign attacking Donald Trump on the coronavirus, kind of giving a timeline of how things have played out. Let me play the first 43 seconds of this clip.
Early January, Donald Trump is first warned of the virus. He ignores it.
We have it totally under control. It's going to be just fine.
Defends the Chinese government instead. January 30th, Trump's own cabinet secretary warns of a pandemic, raising concerns that the Chinese government isn't being transparent. Trump calls him an alarmist.
We think we have it very well under control. We're working very closely with China and other countries, and we think it's going to have a very good ending for us.
The next day, the Dow plummets 600 points. Desperate to protect the stock market from sliding further, Trump continues to deny the threat and praise the Chinese government.
So similar messaging in a way there, Jamal. Yeah. Kind of both of these people have somehow praised China along the way, not handling it right. I don't know if it's kind of a stalemate. I'm curious if you thought one ad over the other was more effective.
I think, believe it or not, I think Biden's ad is more effective than Trump's ad in regards to COVID-19 because Biden's ad just so happens to be entirely true. I mean, it's not so much that Joe Biden didn't say those things regarding China, but it's more so if you're talking about something that's happening right now in the immediate, and Donald Trump is basically trying to blame China for this stuff. And this ad basically makes the point that, well, you weren't always blaming China for this stuff. At some point, you were on board with China in regards to its handling of this particular pandemic. But it makes that secondary point of, look at the number of people that have died. And in comparison to what Donald Trump was saying while these people were dying, basically it shows this person was incompetent and this person was all the way up to the point of all of these people passing. He was still making this point that everything is going to be fine, nothing to see here, folks. We're going to be celebrating Christmas or celebrating Easter at church. Like, so I do think that there is a tonal component to that where the author or the person who's saying it, and then the background where you have that beat, that menacing beat in the background as you go through the litany of failures that Donald Trump had. I thought it was an effective ad. I thought it was great.
Yeah. We got one more ad here I want to run. Let's play this last clip, and I'll share some more of my thoughts on these last two.
We've all seen it. Day after day, hour after hour, 260,000 words praising himself.
And on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your response to this crisis?
I'd rate it a 10. I think we've done a great job.
Complaining.
We've gotten very little credit for the great job we've done.
Attacking the press.
I say that you're a terrible reporter. That's what I say. I think it's a very nasty question.
Dangerous and delusional ideas.
And supposing you brought the light inside the body, which you can do either through the skin or in some other way. Then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute.
Well, tomorrow, Joe Biden's going to have plenty of Donald Trump's own words to use there against him. That ad felt like one of the more effective ones. Again, the more you can use the candidate's own words against them, I think the more effective it is, because you're not hiring an actor, you're not using some unknown person's voice, but you're using Donald Trump's voice directly there, and some of those comments he's making are just beyond the pale.
I'm curious. So do you think this is going to be effective against Trump? Trump has done this for 4 years or 3 years, where he's come out, done one comically poorly worded statement after the next, scribbled in crayon that he's reading to the American public. Does this adversely affect him when he does this constantly in this way? Like, this is not like a random Republican where you would find, let's say, some really bad clips, and there may be 4 of them where the public can say, okay, fair enough. But when it's continuous and when it's just, never ending, does it really have the bang for its buck as if you could find a few? I know that sounds weird, but it's almost counterintuitive in a way.
I think one of the more disgusting moments of Donald Trump, I can't even say that with a straight face. There's so many disgusting moments to list, but one that kind of sticks out in my head is, if you remember, he was at a campaign rally and he was mocking a disabled journalist.
Right.
And he started kind of shaking as if he had the same issues or the same...
Like multiple sclerosis or something.
Yeah, the same physical adaptation of that journalist. And there was no kind of response to it. People laughed at it on his camp and then kind of just moved on. Well, him making fun of that journalist wasn't leading to anybody dying, at least in that kind of vacuum of a situation, where his response to the coronavirus is leading to, over 80,000 plus people dead now. And so I think it's the coronavirus and his handling is such a unique situation that people are directly dying from his decisions here domestically, that it's so beyond anything we've seen from him whatsoever. And it seems pretty clear. I was trying to find some just here's why we're voting for Joe Biden ads from Joe Biden, and there's none of them, right? Everything's going to be focused on how bad Donald Trump is, and you want him out of office. I think the other tricky thing, Jamal, and I guess this is where you have to remember that when you put out these ads, you can't just simply say, please play these ads for any Republican, and then please play these for Democrat. Whatever you put out there is going to open consumption, and a lot of these topics will be really interesting to watch, especially, I think, Joe Biden, what ads he puts out and what issues he talks about, because that'll give you a better look at if he's really sincere at tackling these issues that we talk about in the task force. Does he really care about criminal justice reform of police brutality? And we're not going to see that, right? Because Republicans will have to see that, whatever moderates are will have to see that. And so I think that these ads are so vitally important. I wanted to focus on them today because for me, it really shows where a candidate's focus is and whether or not they are saying the message to everybody in the country, or if they're only saying it to select email lists and to certain people in certain settings. These ads really hold a candidate accountable to what they're actually putting out there.
Yeah, it does. I mean, but I guess the difference is this is not Joe Biden making an affirmative case. I mean, even Sanders. It's just basically Trump is horrendous. Trump is the apocalypse. Trump is going to eat babies and, kick puppies. And so it's like, so you got to vote for me. Now, I think the most effective aspect of this has to do with COVID-19. By Joe Biden not being in office. And, for the most part, the public, for whatever reason, trusts Trump more on this than Biden. I mean, the polling that I've seen, Biden was getting like 20-something% approval rating in regards to his handling of COVID-19 on issues of trust. Trump was getting like 40%. Now, that's nowhere near Fauci or some of the other people that are involved. But at the very least, he was leading on it. But the catch becomes Joe Biden is not responsible, at least in the sense of COVID-19, for 90,000 people dying, with a number that probably by the time you have the presidency is going to be up to 200,000. And so that has to eat into you, especially when you're talking about the older generation, the older demographic that was going for Trump in the areas of those states, middle states that or heartland states that have started to see increases in the handling of the disease, especially when Trump is trying to push open the economy. I do think that bites, especially if you had a relative that died, regardless of whether you're a Republican or not. If you had a relative that died, that will bite, and those ads may be effective because of such, even if it just stops somebody from voting, whether or not they vote for Joe Biden, even if they stop them from voting for Trump.
Yeah, well, Jamar, we need to put a pin in it there. Thanks for taking a tour of some of the latest political ads with me there. I'm always fascinated, and like I said, I nerd out on them. So if you're listening to us and you also like political ads, make sure you share those with us on our Twitter, Sputnik Misfits, or shoot us a message on Facebook or on the Progressive Soapbox platform so we can get those on air. For that was our weekly Politics of Art segment. We need to take one last break here on Political Misfits before we close out the show for the day. You're listening to Radio Sputnik live in D.C. We're back after this.
What's the most important hour of the day? It's the Critical Hour with Dr. Wilmer Leon. On this show, we don't just deliver the latest headlines. We divide the real from the fake. Tune in to hear from some of the most brilliant political minds of today, get in-depth news and analysis that goes beyond the surface and dig straight into the details. Set your clock to the Critical Hour for a news perspective unlike any of those other guys. Tune in to the Critical Hour with Dr. Wilmer Leon, weekdays 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern, and catch us on Facebook Live. You're listening to Radio Sputnik.
Welcome back to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik, where we bring you news, politics, and culture without the red and blue treatment. I'm Bob Schlegelberg here with Jamarl Thomas. Jamarl, I just want one big shout out to Radio Sputnik for all of the hard work our team does here and the way in which we are able to stay with you here daily. I just love the fact that I get to bring news, politics, and culture to you without long 4 or 5 minute commercial ads where we sell people capitalist consumption America. The fact that we can continue to stay with you here ad-free on Radio Sputnik. So thank you for all of our listeners for being with us today and for all of you who've given us a call. Jamarl, we got a few more stories I wanted to fit in so we don't miss anything today. I'll let you pick here. Do you want to count days, count cases, or count viewers?
Count days. Yeah, let's go with days. I'll go with days.
All right. So earlier this month, the architect and counting days. Excuse me. Let me get to the right story here. Jamarl, in news of cheap political reports that more than 40,000 National Guard members currently helping states with coronavirus testing and contact tracing will see their deployments end June 24th, just one day before those National Guard members would become eligible for federal benefits like early retirement and education assistance. Say with me now, we love our troops. We just don't want to pay them or help them in any material way. Political cites a senior FEMA official who was on a phone call last week about the National Guard deployment. It was made clear during the call that these thousands of National Guard members were deployed in March, but will find themselves with only 89 days of duty credit, one short of the 90-day threshold for qualifying for benefits.
That's so wrong.
Officials on the call didn't dispute the cutoff or advocate for an extension, but they did discuss the PR problem it might pose. A FEMA official told dozens of other colleagues on the call, quote, "We would greatly benefit from unified messaging regarding the conclusion of their services prior to hitting the 90-day mark and the retirement benefit implications associated with it." So the government is bleeding workers until the last possible moment, then cutting them loose before they'd have to compensate them more adequately. Sound familiar, Jamaro?
That's horrendous. I mean, honestly, that's utterly horrendous. I mean, you have a situation where these guys are basically doing a job. And at the end of the process, you're like, all right, I'm going to get rid of you guys 30 seconds before time to have to give you this item. And I'm being hyperbolic, but you get my point. It just feels wrong to me to have somebody to put that much investment and then you cut them off at the knees at the very last spot. It just feels wrong.
Well, and Jamar, like, what if they're needed on June 25th? Like, again, like, we're not seeing the decline in cases that we've been told will need to come before we open the country back up. And if there's a second wave, all of a sudden you're firing everybody on June 24th. Well, what happens if June 25th there continues to be an increase of cases in the country and we actually need these people?
I suppose they hire more. That way they just don't have to pay. I mean, honestly, that sounds bad. But think of it like if you, like, let's say Papa John's. And Papa John's, they want to pay the health insurance and that type of stuff. So Papa John's would say, all right, well, if you work 40 hours, we're happy to give you your health care, but we're going to have you guys work 38 hours. I'm picking on Papa John's, but I'm making the very specific case that you have companies that do this, that tries to cut the amount of time that you can work and just bring on somebody else to do the overtime. Now, that's depending upon whether or not it's just more painful or more onerous in order to have to pay for that, or, hire that extra staff. But if you're really trying to save money in those ways, you may just rotate staff.
Yeah, and what's crazy is, like, the cost of rotating staff might cost more than just giving these people, like, pittance at retirement. It's not like you all of a sudden just get, like, full retirement benefits. It's based on how long you served and what you paid into it is what you get out. But again, the U.S. government has no desire to help people long-term or think about them into the future after they've retired. That's for the private market to deal with. So good luck with that. And Jamal, no need to apologize for going at Papa John's. You're welcome to attack Papa John and their racist way and their not so great ingredients anytime you want here on Political Misfits. Jamal, we missed the story earlier, and I did just want to mention it because I think the plot thickens a little bit, and it's fascinating to see the continued fallout of the firing of the State Department Inspector General Steve Littick. We had reported yesterday that most of the complaints against Pompeo had centered around his colleagues or his subordinates having to run errands for him. Some said they felt like Uber Eats, but with a gun, which was pretty fascinating, and his spending habits when it came to his wife. But now we have more information that Mike Pompeo allegedly had refused to sit for an interview with the State Department Inspector General's office as part of its probe into the administration's move to bypass Congress and expedite last year's $8 billion arms sale to Saudi Arabia by declaring an emergency. House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Eliot Engel claimed the State Department Inspector General fired by Donald Trump on Friday, Steve Littick, had nearly completed an investigation into Pompeo's controversial decision to fast-track the same arms sale. Congressman Engel told CNN Monday, and I quote here, "I have learned that there may be another reason for Littick's firing. His office was investigating at my request Trump's phony declaration of an emergency so he could send weapons to Saudi Arabia. We don't have the full picture yet, but it's troubling the Secretary Pompeo wanted Mr. Littick pushed out before this work could be completed." Jamal, curious if you make anything with this extra wrinkle. I don't remember there ever being a problem of United States officials selling weapons to other people abroad, but apparently here now the Engel and the Democratic Congress somewhat care, but it seems more politics as usual, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I mean, I don't know the entirety of the rules around how you sell weapons or whatnot, but I don't remember Obama having an issue selling weapons to Saudi Arabia. Obama was selling, to put it in perspective, if you remember, Obama was selling weapons to Israel or giving weapons to Israel, not even selling, while they were killing Palestinians. Do you remember that? I think they killed 2,200 Palestinians. 80% were basically innocent. They were dropping bombs on houses to alert the people that they were going to be dropping a bomb on a house. Like, it was that type of stuff. During that time, Obama was still giving them weapons. I don't remember. I don't remember any uproar over this.
Yeah, it's a mess to say the least. One last story here in sad news, Jamar. It seems that love and loyalty might be falling apart there between Donald Trump and Fox News.
Yes.
First, Donald Trump had tweeted several accounts criticizing Fox's inconsistent framing of the use of hydroxychloroquine to treat COVID-19, including infamous Twitter liberal, the horse whisperer. The president concentrated his ire on Fox News' Neil Cavuto, the hydroxychloroquine naysayer. How dare you, Neil? Then Trump followed up with a direct attack, tweeting late last night that, quote, Fox News is no longer the same. We miss the great Roger Ailes. You have more anti-Trump people by far than ever before looking for a new outlet. Yeah, we miss Roger Ailes.
The great Roger Ailes.
Can we bring some of that back tomorrow?
The great Roger Ailes. Roger Ailes was kicked out for basically abuse, correct? That's why Roger Ailes was pushed out of Fox. It's just hilarious to me that he's calling him the great Roger Ailes. That's awesome.
Good old days at Fox News. Well, he soon turned his attention back attacking MSNBC this morning, so maybe things will be back to normal between him and Fox News by the end of our show, which is in about a minute from now. I'm sure things have worked out. Tomorrow, we do need to leave it there for the day. A big thank you for Teresa Lundy and Margaret Kimberly for being excellent guests and joining us. Big shout out to all of the callers for calling in today. Thank you to Ryan, Dimitri, Andre, and Saul, and the entire Sputnik News team for keeping us live over the last few months here. Shout out, as always, to our producer, Michelle Whitty, and on behalf of Jamal Thomas and myself, Bob Schlegelberg, thank you for listening. Now get back to organizing.
Guys, as always, thank you for joining us for the show today, 12 to 2. Let's see. I don't think we have any chats, right? Also, thank you all for engaging with Kimberly. I mean, they're topics that get really, really interesting in the way that the people's perspective and how people feel about it. And, whatever you think of Obama, from the standpoint of some African Americans, it was somewhat of a heady experience for Obama to get into that office. I would say even the most. I don't know. There are many who still have that feeling, despite not necessarily knowing the policies of Obama or the things that he was doing in that office. And they just have this kind of feeling for the guy. I think I agree with Kimberly. In 10 years, unless something drastic happens in regards to our policies, the public, Democrats, will still probably view him in similar ways. And that is an unfortunate reality. Like, share, and of course, subscribe. Thanks all. I will maybe see you later tonight. I've done a bunch of shows this morning, and my wife needs me for a game show. So we're going to go kick some ass